This place, the Outou Manuia, offers a place to land, a place to breathe, and a place to belong. Second Samoa is your home away from home.
Ia o le whaapoponga fo i leo le tātou prokalama i le neva yaso ai ngoi no le Outou Manuia o le whatamanu malmalai e ao iai ia le tomai o le tātou tunuku i whafo nei le whalama whatasi e ma le investment banker ia Luamata Tagaloa me le multi le tuaila whaftai sunga mata tu sai fo mal fa no I no demi e fa stata la no anga e winga I nga luenga lo fenga I ma oe ia me se fo I se patu funga ma se nati mo tupulanga talavo o lo mfa yo na fa fonga mai le prokalama. So Mata, thank you so much for agreeing to this interview. I know your time feels restricted and been trying to get you on for a while without success. And part of the idea here for Outou Manuia is to create this platform where young people can come and deposit their knowledge, their wisdom, their experiences. And then others who are coming up might come here and take some of that and take it to the next level. So that's why I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to talk to you about what you've accomplished over the years.
Yeah, good to be here. Thank you for having me.
The first part of the segment is talking about your roots. You know, growing up in Long Beach, how did that impact your being and your skill set? The many cultures that are in Long Beach, the languages, the social realities, and how did growing up in Long Beach prepare you for the world of business and finance?
Your point of just the diversity that is in Long Beach, I think it sort of it helped me sort of prepare for all the various and diverse situations that I would face, you know, not looking back. I've been put in a lot of those environments where you have to be agile, you have to be nimble, you have to sort of adapt to what's in front of you, and what's in front of you looks different. Where as you sort of move around throughout your journey, and I think you know, growing up in Long Beach sort of gave me a lot of different flavors of cultures, and being mindful of those around me, being mindful of my environments. And as they continue to shift, even, you know, throughout my childhood in Long Beach, I think that's really prepared me for any situation, any environment that I've seen thus far. You know, it's just the typical things that you are mindful of when you're in a diverse environment, of, you know, being mindful of others, being inquisitive, sort of contributing your diversity in those spaces as well. So I think just those things, and maybe it was something that I didn't appreciate at the time growing up. I think that's just growing up. That was how the world was. That's how I viewed the world. That's how I experienced it. And so, you know, once I left Long Beach, actually looking back now, you realize how helpful that has been.
And I've always felt that we grew up in the hood, right? And I've sort of like told people on the inside of, but what do you think? What kind of neighborhood do you think you grew up in?
Yeah, and so I guess, you know, the one slice of the diversity that I was sort of alluding to in my response as well is that piece of it too. It's not just like the culturals, and not just the you know, different diverse set of people. There are also like diverse situations and circumstances. You know, as a lot of us know, there a lot of gang activity in Long Beach, and so I do agree that you know, there I think we grew up in, pieces of the hood. I recognize that there are pieces in Long Beach where it's more hood than others. And then there's other, you know, sort of neighborhoods in Long Beach that are actually considered nice. I thought we were kind of right in the middle. And again, I think that just further contributed to me being able to kind of be hyper aware of my environment, and being able to adapt accordingly. So I agree with your view. I know Long Beach has changed a lot since then, but I actually think that is actually helpful, when that is the environment that you grow up in. It equips you, like going to work in corporate America is a walk in the park, compared to walking to school on some days and sort of keeping your head on the swivel just to make sure you don't have to be alert, you know. So yeah, I agree, but I think it could be a benefit. It could be something that helps you.
Yeah. But for those who are listening to this interview and know the landscape of Long Beach, you grew up on 7th and Cedar, the intersection of 7th and Cedar, which is downtown. And the kids there go to Edison Elementary School, right? I don't know if you remember, but that's where we started taking you to. It's part of the public school system, Long Beach Unified School District. And then you tested out of that because this is part of the escaping the hood and still living in the hood, right? So you tested out of that. And then very early on in your educational career, you start going to schools in the East Side. I'm thinking Fremont, right? And then Stanford. And then from there, you went out to go to high school in Poly. My point is, part of your success is your community, your parents, kind of like hacking the hood system to get you out of there. So though you're from the hood, but you were educated elsewhere. So, and it's amazing how that seems to be the theme in your life as you get older. You get to talk to this pastor in the hood, but from a perch that is up there. Family formation and early values. Who would you say were the most important people in shaping your character when you were growing up?
I mean, my my upbringing was interesting just because my so I would say my parents, but with that, my parents actually, are the pastor and the falitua of our congregation. So it, I didn't have your, I guess, stereotypical, if there was a stereotype, of parents, because they weren't just bringing up me and my siblings; they were bringing up a congregation. So it wasn't just us; it was our first cousins, our other friends and family that comprise our congregation, and so my parents were core, like the day to day in the nucleus of our family. My dad checks my homework. My mom takes me to school. They help make these decisions that you sort of alluded to earlier of saying, hey, like if we're capable, maybe we do send you to Stanford Middle School on the other side in the interest of, being, getting a different and ideally better education. And so again, those were kind of like the day to day, like my nucleus, and they impacted my life in ways that, I can only appreciate now looking backwards, or I didn't really understand during my upbringing. But fortunately enough, the aunties and uncles of the congregation, right, the other members of the other adults, were kind of all pillars of my upbringing as well. So I had a ton of, parents as a community. And so I would say all of them, had a helping hand when my parents are not around to sort of guide me in the right direction. There's always my aunts, my uncles, and sort of like village upbringing is what I would say. So, which again, I was very fortunate to have that.
Yeah. So it's still true. It does take a village to bring someone up. And when you're successful, the entire village shares in your success. So, when you face challenges later in life, what part of that upbringing helped keep you going?
Yeah, I think it's like the cultural um hard work, motifs.
Mm,
I think
mm,
it can even sort of trace it back to, our family and many other Polynesian families like ourselves that make their way over to the island. So the head of the household makes a decision to, you know, let's let's leave Samoa, let's leave the islands and come to this place in, hopes of a better life, for more opportunities. The list goes on and on. And so I think continuing to push that envelope, as I find myself in places that are unfamiliar to me and find myself trying to accomplish tasks that are unclear and may be um sorry, that are very challenging to me. I think um it's kind of ingrained in just our history.
mm,
And it just takes a lot of hard work and just keep getting after it, pushing that envelope, pushing to the next frontier of what could be. And so I think that's what kind of keeps me going. It's always kind of been in the back of my mind of, um, what's next for us? How can we continue to move our family, hopefully an extension, our people sort of forward who, previously took the big leap of faith to come here and to search for better. And so I think whether consciously or subconsciously, that serves as a reminder for me during challenging situations or situations where maybe I feel that I'm not um, fully prepared. But again, just repeating the
mm.
ability, we have a proven capability of pushing ourselves and um, accomplishing hard things. And so
Yeah,
kind of leaning in on that.
yeah. The Samoan word is Sa'ili Malo. Sa'ili Malo, which literally translates looking for kingdom or looking for wins, right? So that's ingrained in all of us. That's why we make good ball players, rugby players. That's the kind of thing that's ingrained in all of us in our own language. And I think part of the function of this platform is to translate some of those cultural wisdom into that which allows a person to succeed in modern day America. Um, and what you're just describing is what that is for our people. Sa ilimalo. Sa ilimalo, you're looking for new lands, new kingdoms, new wins, and it's part of your DNA. And that's why the next topic is work ethic and discipline. That's where that's coming from, right? That's where that's coming from. And you don't get to be an investment banker because you're just lounging around on a Saturday morning, right? So I think to the extent that you're able to connect to the Sa'ili Malo part of your culture, then I think your work ethic and discipline will continue to be there. And along that rubric, as a young person, did you have chores, jobs, sports, church duties, and responsibilities that taught you discipline?
Yeah. I think, um, you kind of alluded to it as well. What makes us good ball players. I think, um, sports is a critical part in a lot of, Polynesian kids' lives, myself included. It's and it's kind of where your friends go. Like, hey, I I wasn't a great football player, but my best friend Michael Teo was one of the captains of the football team, and some of my really good friends. I can list them all out, but I think that's just also where we find community as well. And so for the below average ball player like myself, I still felt obligated and pulled towards, being a member of that community. And so I, I, I did have, to answer your question, I did have sports, I did have chores that all helps, in terms of building good habits, pushing yourself, again, working with others, huge in everything that you do. I mean, teamwork is a big thing. And in Wall Street, actually, there's a what I've seen, there's a little bit of a kind of bias towards candidates with backgrounds in sports, just because sports are hard, and working together with teammates that are doing, you're relying on someone else to do their contribution. They're relying on you to do your contribution for the greater cause, the greater goal, right? To win in a lot of sports, in the sports analogy. And so that's hard. That's just a hard thing to do. And that translates very well to investment banking, but not just investment banking. I mean, just everything corporate America. Like there's, maybe with the exception of Elon, there's few people there's a one man show, but even Elon will admit, it's not a one man show. And so being able to work in teams and doing hard things together, being better for it, holding each other accountable, kind of all these things that come with sports is very, very formidable for anyone. And it's something that you can carry throughout your, wherever you go. And so I think, playing sports is helpful, even again for folks that are like the 6'7", 340-pound Samoan kid that's just, passes the eye test. I don't pass the eye test. That's not me. But I've learned so much, and it's helped me in so many ways. And, it starts off with just you building a community of, hey, like, I'm not the 6'8", 300-pounder, but my good friend is. And, we go to lunch together, we go to practice together. And so it starts off with a community building, but then again, you're trying to strengthen that in working towards a common goal, which is something that will be helpful in whatever you do.
Yeah. No, that's a good value. Yeah. Outou Manuia pe lava le mea o te loa. And what is that? Ele fai umani tala tangata. One person speaks for all of us. So there's one person leading, but most of us are just following and participating and praying and then taking turns to lead. So those are some of the things that, as you were sharing with me, the role of sports and your role in your friend's sports career, it reminds me of that. All those cultural values. The next thing on the docket is so after you went to Menlo, okay, Menlo College. Why? What was your experience there?
Menlo College was great. Very small school, and I think coming out of high school, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and so now that I reflect back and think about it, the small size of Menlo, the sort of limited. One could say that it's limited. So at Menlo College, it's a business school, and it's focused on. There's effectively two paths that you can take at Menlo. One is business administration, and one is psychology. I think even the psychology major route is sort of rooted in business psychology, leadership psychology, that type of psychology. So again, there's this school that has a very hard business sort of filter and lens on it. But within that, I mean, business, there's accounting, there's finance, there's marketing, there's so many different paths under those two, quote unquote, like potentially limiting umbrella. But I think for me, it actually served me well because, I have friends that go to bigger universities that have a lot more breadth in terms of what you can major in. And it takes a while to figure out what you want to major in. You end up going to university for, 6, 7, 8 years. Whereas I think Menlo actually, and I didn't know this at the time or appreciate it, but it actually provided me a little bit of a focus in terms of, I could have done anything. I didn't know what I wanted to do. It sort of filtered it down a little bit and say, hey, like this business world is very interesting. You're in the heart of Silicon Valley where business happens. It's just a place where innovations, you can go back and sort of track just how impactful this place was and continues to be. And business is an interesting angle. And so it kind of gave me that filter.
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead.
And then you graduated with an accounting degree.
That's right. Yes. And then within that, accounting sort of made sense. There was an internship offer that I was fortunate enough to receive to, kind of go and get a summer of real-time experience to see if it was a good fit. And so I did my internship at PwC in San Jose, was fortunate enough to get the return offer post-graduate school, post-graduation. And so that's where I started my career, PwC in San Jose.
Yeah. And then one of the things I noticed about your trajectory, you even pushed the envelope there at Menlo. You played football there. You were some sort of a dorm monitor or something. And then when PwC extended you that offer, you made sure that you had enough credits to take the CPA exam and got that out of the way. So all these things that you started real early picking up, going the extra mile. I saw that as you go through college, and that seems to be like second nature to you, huh?
Yeah, I think, I think I've always been driven to a certain extent. Again, part of that is my upbringing. Part of that is the Sa'idu Malo that you kind of referred to. It's kind of embedded in us. Part of that too is also just my environment. Kind of being plopped in the middle of Silicon Valley, and you start to talk to the professors. You start to meet, guest speakers that come to Menlo to speak, and they kind of show you a world that you may not have been open to and privy to. And so I think, it wasn't an overnight or, I can't point to any one single event that sort of sparked that. I think it's actually a little bit more of a day by day, little by little, event by event sort of thing that's kind of helped shape where I want to go. And I think once you have, your North Star, it just takes hard work. And again, that's something, hard work is not a foreign concept. It's actually probably, a pillar of our people. And so I think, just finding your direction. And again, your North Star changes as you continue to grow, as you continue to reinvent yourself, as you continue to pivot and throughout, life. But I guess I could kind of attribute that to as I'm exposed to this new world of business of, even at PwC. I mean, PwC is a huge organization, and I was an intern with, if in a room full of really, really smart interns and really, really, are from really, really, prominent schools. And here I am, a Samoan kid from Long Beach, from Menlo College, who people often mistaken to be a junior college 2-year program. But I was in the room with these, what people that I, think it was like, man, like better than me, I guess is, to put it bluntly. And so you just keep showing up. If they invite you to the room, you say yes, and you show up 5 minutes early, and you cut your hair, you shave your beard, and you pay attention, and you work hard. And so, Yeah, I don't think it's maybe something that's second nature, but maybe I was just fortunate enough to continue to be influenced and nudged a little forward. And again, once you kind of have that direction, you just, you know, put your shoulder into it and just work.
Yeah. And then one of the things that happened during Menlo is you met the love of your life.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So you were doing all these things, and then at the same time you were participating in, the college experience, finding love and eventually marrying Nadia. Um, I mean, that's a full life. And then you left PwC. What happened?
Uh, so I started at PwC. It was great. I learned a ton. I mean, reading financial statements, working with publicly listed companies. Um, I learned a lot about business. They say accounting is the language of business. And so, again, I spent a few years at PwC kind of learning that language and kind of growing up in PwC, you start to be, a little bit you start to have a little bit more interactions with the partners. So I was in audit, and so I got really close to the audit partners that were on my, in my the names that I covered, and so you get to build a relationship with them. You get to pick their brain, ask them questions. Not just work, but just we'll grab a coffee and we'll discuss kind of like their history, their trajectory, where do they see themselves, and so long story short, the more conversations that I had, the more I sort of realized that if the partners was the finish line of my trajectory that I was currently on, I didn't necessarily want that to be my finish line. And so as soon as I realized that, again, your North Star changes as you progress in life, as you get more data, as you get more experiences, as your family dynamic changes for a plethora of reasons. Your North Star changes, but my North Star changed after having those conversations. And again, I was back to trying to figure out, okay, well, what do I want? Like, what is my finish line? What does that look like? And so then I pivoted to eBay. I did an interesting a role that seemed interesting to me at the time. And so I was there for 3 years. And then, another pivot, you don't get it right the first time a lot of times. And so, then I decided to pivot away from eBay. Still wanted to do something in tech, still wanted to do something in client services. And so, but COVID happened. And then I really had to figure out, how to move next.
And then COVID happened, right? I mean, that changed not just your trajectory, but the entire world. I mean, from our church perspective, we started airing our worship services online because they were banning gatherings here in California, and that's when this whole Outou Manuia platform came about, because we got used to looking at cameras and assuming there's at least 5 other people listening into the conversation, and you kind of clean your language up a little bit. And so that's the skill set, the gift that COVID gave us, and it has led to this platform, Outou Manuia, 6 years later. So you took time off from eBay, you resigned, and then you went to Duke.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I went to Duke.
That was a big risk. You left your job, a
Right.
well-paying job at eBay, and you just took your family, your wife, to Duke.
Yeah. There was. It's true. There is a real opportunity cost. From leaving the corporate world, leaving your full-time job and going full-time MBA. But again, coming out of the uncertainty of COVID, we were unsure what life looked like after, and actually it kind of helped us decide on that, just because as the world sorts itself out, we thought it was best use of our time and resources to just reskill and relevel up. Part of the value proposition that these full-time MBA programs offer you are this deep network of professionals, of alumni that can help you, on top of the structure that they put around these processes, right? Because the biggest value proposition is to get you a better job, post your graduation. And again, they really leverage their network to do that. And so I thought it was a great platform. Me and Nadia, we both thought it was a great platform to sort of hard pivot into something more finance. And so we did that. We lived in Duke for 2 years. The family came and visited. It was an exciting time just because it was a brand new place. I think up to that point, not many of us had been to North Carolina, Durham, North Carolina specifically, unless it was like some sort of layover somewhere, or you flight cancellation routed you that way, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. But I think it was a great experience. Really unplug and kind of like delve deep into reskilling yourself. The fortunate thing at Duke was that there were a lot of sort of foundational knowledge that I had, not just at work, but at Menlo. But Duke and MBA programs are just like the next level up. It's graduate school, after all. And so, it was more complex concepts, but built along the same foundations that I had. So it was great to just double click into a lot of these concepts, that maybe I only knew at a surface level. One, because it is undergrad, was my education prior to that, and two, maybe some concepts that wasn't using on a daily basis in my professional role. So it was good. We unplugged. We had we have lifelong friends from that, which is arguably more important. And during my recruiting time there, I interned at JP Morgan. And so fortunate enough to come back post graduation.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that trip when we came to North Carolina, and
it was a good.
And visit Cape May, Uncle Vita. Why Duke? This is the question on our tablet.
Yeah. Quite frankly, I got to the final round of Stanford and I didn't get in. So, I'm
your first choice was Stanford.
I'm not far from I'm far from perfect, and I think that's one of those kind of, I don't know, it's one of those things where it's like, I didn't get in, but we look back at it, it's like, man, like that it was probably a blessing in disguise, because it's hard to say no to Stanford, but Stanford is right down the street from Menlo. Now, I'm not at all putting them on the same. They're not comparable. Stanford is the upper echelon of institutions, but there was no. There would have been less of a shift of an experience. There wouldn't have been the Cape May, North Carolina trip. There wouldn't have been, if I stayed in Stanford and then got a full-time job here, which I ended up doing, I would have never left California. And so, the 2 years living outside of California were actually very formidable, and experiences that I would never trade back. But I just wanted to be clear that there were some local universities that I didn't get into, and so maybe that made my decision easier. But the why Duke, again, just Duke is a renowned university as well. Maybe less familiar growing up on the West Coast, but on the East Coast, Duke is a very, very it's a very, very it's looked highly upon. And so various reasons, that was there. I think another reason too, now that I'm thinking about it, is Nadia's childhood friend, John Lautaha, who actually went to Stanford while I was at Menlo. So that's where I met John. Um, he was just wrapping up his second year at Duke. And so he was a point of contact who I kind of consulted with and said, I asked them a bunch of questions about North Carolina in general, Duke, how the program is, what what are the industries that Duke has a strong presence in, with the thought in mind of, if they have strong ties in the finance world, that it'd be a great fit for me because that's where I want to go. And so just a lot of different conversations, praying on it and certainly trying to sort out because although I didn't get into Stanford, there were other schools that were on the table as well. And so we landed on Duke for various different reasons, but I think, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. The thing about this country that many people may not know is there's this East Coast, West Coast divide. Nobody talks about it. But even the gangsters are familiar with that, right? Tupac Shakur and Biggie, right? So it's one of those things that unless you live in this country, you don't know. But that was one experience that I got from you going to the East Coast. I say, wow, look at the country divided like that. New York still continues to be the financial center of this country, and Silicon Valley has its own little quirks for you. So I was very fortunate that God is able to allow you to participate in both coasts. So that experience will always be yours. And of course, your family and village get to participate in that as well. Talking about diversity. Yes. So JP Morgan in the world of high finance. So if someone were listening to this podcast and he's thinking, well, Mata can do it, I can do it, how would she get into JP Morgan and high finance?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about my experience and landing here, getting here, sort of looking around and what is this place and how to get here, I actually realized that I don't think I started early enough, which again, it's one of those things where recruiting continues to move earlier and earlier. I mean, let's use the sports example, right? There's seventh graders, eighth graders that are getting full ride scholarships to universities based on, their Pop Warner performance, or maybe just also their sheer just size and build. Now there's NIL, right, where college students are actually getting paid. And so there's this constant moving of the needle earlier and earlier and earlier. And so I would say that, as soon as possible, and I think the great thing is that what I mean by preparing earlier and getting exposure and experiences earlier, and getting just to know how to get into these places earlier, doing that preparation also prepares you for others, so again, you don't, not everyone wants to be an investment banker and not everyone should be an investment banker, but you want to give yourself a shot, and there are a lot of sort of commonalities of how to prepare. And what I mean, just to put a little bit more of concrete examples to that is, there are kids that are starting, we're in our internship now, right? And you get to meet these interns. They're auditioning for, 2028 start, right? So again, junior year internship. But as I start to look and look at these kids' resume more and more often. I mean, these kids are doing freshman year internships, pre-undergrad internships, sophomore year internships, two during the school year. And so, if college hasn't already been, a challenging enough, now you have to really plant those seeds early. You have to network and you have to get these experiences sooner rather than not. Again, for me, I only did my internship at PwC during my junior summer. My freshman summer, I went home and I slept on the couch and got criticized for sleeping so much. And then I went back and reported. And Menlo was a small school, so we didn't I played football there, but it wasn't, like the D1 schools that sort of take up your whole summer and train you during the spring and, kind of like keep you building. It was like hey, here's your workout plan, please come back in decent shape before, school starts. And so that was my freshman year summer. My sophomore year summer, I actually think I stayed in Menlo. I think it was kind of like a summer RA sort of program there. But again, now that I'm looking back and if you were to compare my, junior year summer resume to the junior summer resume that I'm seeing hit the desk and that eventually do sort of join JP Morgan platforms alike, there's a lot of work to be done sooner. And so, again, I think, as young kids are starting to think about it, and again, just doing those internships, it prepares you for a potential investment banking future, but it also prepares you for private equity, venture capitalists, strategic finance, accounting alike. There's just a lot of different paths. But now that I think about it, it's like, man, I could have done so much more earlier. And so that would be sort of my advice. And then, again, it all works out. You kind of land at the bank that you want to land at if investment banking is your trajectory. But that's probably one of the biggest sort of insights that I've gleaned in such a competitive space.
Yeah. And there's also those legacy pieces that, you kind of do what your dad does, right? It's that sort of like an easy lift. And when I think about your trajectory, you broke away from the business of our family, let's say, which is faith, church, community, that sort of thing. And so you've achieved escape velocity, let's say. But so here's the thing: when you come back home, you have your identity intact. You know where you belong. You know your community, and you've got humility. This is the one thing I admire about you, Mata, not as my son, but as a person in the world. Right? You've got this humility. You've gotten to the top of the mountain, and every time you come for a falavelave or some random event that you find yourself here, you're humble. You're served well. So I just want you to know that we do recognize that, and that'll be a good value for just about any Samoan kid who's planning to achieve any goal. So let's see. I'm going down these questions. So, what parts of your upbringing help you stay humble? Was it that sofa that we reserved for you, or the fe'aus?
Yeah, it's just I just think it starts off with just being molded as a child. You're just obedience is something that's really embedded in our culture. And I mean, it's important. I mean, just going back to what we spoke about earlier, there are leaders of the family, right? There's chiefs, there's fa'aus, there's parents, there's grandparents that sort of head of the household. Maybe they do a lot of the talking and lecturing. And then there's, the kids where we grow up and we are execution. Execution is kind of our role. And you need both. You need the vision, and then you need the hands to execute. And it's one of those things where, in order to lead, you must first serve, right? And so in order to get the vision, you actually need execution experience, some that you've done these Falabalaves over and over and over again, and you know what works, what doesn't work. And then that data also informs like, oh, well, if there's a shift in paradigm of how Falabalaves are, if my sister marries a Tongan, now there's two different versions of a Falabelave coming together. But again, they've done so many and we've done so many. And so that the execution experience, is critical, and knowing and sort of it's like starring in your role, that whole concept of like starring in your role of execution that actually builds your experience. And then it actually qualifies you to eventually one day maybe, be a visionary, be a leader. And, then there's a new generation of execution. And that is exactly the business model of investment banking. I mean, we have MDs that go out, they hunt for business, they make promises to clients. And then, those promises are then supported by not just the immediate deal team, the junior bankers like myself, but then the full force of the JP Morgan platform as needed. And so I think that is always great. So when I come home, I do, again, I kind of get into execution mode. Um, uh, One, because it's a good muscle to build. You want to be a doer in all that you do. I mean, the idea is eventually to become a seer and a visionary, but to do that, it helps to have a lot of sort of execution experience. So that's one reason why I do that too. But then two, it's also like, I I know that I know that I don't know everything. And I know that there are places and spaces that I go to that I have the least amount of experience and the least amount of perspective and say. And so that's also part of recognizing where you are, the spaces that you operate in. Like, sure, I know I have 3 years of investment banking, but if you were to put me in a room and to sell someone a pen or water, I'd be stumbling through because I'm not a subject matter expert in that, and that's okay. But what's not okay is not recognizing that and coming in and coming to the 5 and say, oh, like the investment banker is here. Like, I'm going to tell you how to, the kongos and like I'm way out of my depth there. And I think important to recognize when you are, and that's okay. That's totally fine. But, I think that's part of the thinking too, of just kind of coming in and just being, well, where can I plug in? Where can I be the most impactful?
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I'm sure every parent who has a son that's so constructed with humility and everything, in spite of all the successes, can only thank God for the blessings bestowed upon them. Which leads me to, number 10, faith, purpose, and meaning. Do you believe your journey has a purpose beyond personal success?
Yes.
What's the
Just,
end goal for you?
I don't know the actual end goal. To be completely honest, I think kind of what we talked about is the medium to near term goal is always shifting. But again, I do recognize that, there is a higher power at work. Part of that is the upbringing, but I think when you sort of remove yourself from being the pastor's kid and going to church every Sunday, going to Bible study, once a week, going to events and all these other things that sort of come with the church. Once you go to college, you go to a different place, you are then sort of standing on your own 2 feet. And so you sort of have to build up your faith and your belief on your own. And luckily I had a good foundation, during my childhood. But again, when you're sort of making the decisions and calls and how to allocate any time that you have, I think it's really important to allocate some of that time to recognizing that, again, there's, this is, we are, not of this world. I think there is a God, and God continues to watch over us and guide us along the way, whether we recognize it or not, whether we acknowledge it or not. And so it's always there. And I think it's definitely something that I tap into, as needed, to kind of help me make any sort of big decisions. Fortunately enough for me, like Nadia is actually pretty similar background, grew up very religious, so it was easy for us to kind of like partner. And again, we have, going back to your humility point, we do not have all the answers. There's only God does, and so trying to tap that and access that, especially during times of, where we just need answers that we are not able to come up with ourselves. So that's kind of like the role it's played for me. And I think I've been very fortunate and blessed by, Heavenly Father for all that I've done. And I recognize that.
Yeah. Because so many people get up there to the top of their echelon and they discover that it's void of any meaning. I mean, and I just hope that we don't find ourselves in that. The pressures are high, but we've got to look for these anchors that ground us. And I think God, having a sense of there is a being out there, kind of anchors us when life gets tough. Okay, any last words for our audience?
I guess just final words is if I'm any example or indication, I'm at JP Morgan. I have yet to meet a Samoan counterpart, Tongan counterpart, Polynesian in general. And so if I could serve as anything, it would just be the knowledge that you can access these spaces that we don't know that we can. And it's we can do anything we put our minds to. Is sort of what I've kind of realized. There's not one traditional path to get to anywhere. And so, if anyone is interested in investment banking or learning more, like, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to be a resource. But again, I just want to instill in viewers and watchers that you can do anything you put your mind to. We are built for it, with the help of our Heavenly Father, of course.
Okay, well, thank you. I think this is a great start to introduce you to our Outou Manuia audience. And then the next time when we circle back, we won't have to go through this again. We'll just get into the meat and potatoes. Yeah. Ben ni te mi fafta e tuaile. Oh, mata o ala fa Samoa. Se fa sa kala fa Samoa ina ia ilo e tanga taule nai le leila ngana.
It's okay, but moriachi te le fafta ia te oere lo sumo fefe alma for my fefe alma le ia Outou Manuia support team mulene avano ele avea ele se vano ele manatu mai halfway, ole tatu ainga lava le nei, iwi lava o te nofo mama, te manatu o te manatu pe uh, second Samoans, ile audience le nei platform. So, mori atu te leo ngam whawhitai.
Yes, fafta mata. So, we'll to interview nam sungai Luamata, Emerson, Tagaloa. Tony alo fale tua ma ia whaongale nei
platform whai mawala whalau te leilai ron finangalo i tātou atunu. Second Samoans, ia me se fo i lato o maua me nei whasalaunga. He loto ono mispo wena Tagaloa le nei, mai Outou Manuia.
Thank you for spending time with us. If you found this content helpful, please like the video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue bringing these insights directly to you. Outou Manuia.